Greetings, ladies and metal-gents, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called Humanity Refuses, written by Arekban. Ultra's wormwood, better known by many as Undying Scourge, opened a gateway to a terraformed landscape of a dirt ball out in the backwater space with a flourish and a flick of his tendril-laden hand, face set in unwavering determination.
My armies have been depleted, but it matters none. I will simply raise a new one.
Battles with cosmic forces of light and justice had rendered the Necromage's previous armies null, repelling his attacks and freeing his thralls' souls from their corpses before Altrez could overwhelm and convert the damned flower-sniffing, life-loving freaks. Altrez walked through the ghastly green ethereal portal of his own construction, leaving the tattered moon he'd been hiding out on, following his last defeat behind and embracing a new world, one he recognized the landscape of, even if he couldn't fully identify it. Once he arrived, he scowled, immediately assaulted by the scent of verdant greenery. It burned his eyes, made his tendrils spasm, made his nostrils tinge and flare. Covering his face, Altrez looked at the skies and searched for some place on the planet more forgiving, more accepting of his particular penchant for death and decay. When he first felt a wave of putrescence hit him, his senses cried out in relief. He immediately sailed towards the area, careening through the air, and feeling he could finally breathe once the foresty surroundings from before started to bleed into the rough and desolate plain with a sulphuric tinge that Altrez couldn't quite place. He landed with a slight bend of his legs and immediately set to work on scanning the area with his system, trying to determine the cause of said smell and just how many dead laid in this area. Results came fast, and though they didn't account for every aspect of Altrez's questions, they at least told him what he suspected was true, and that was that this site was the spot of a long-forgotten battle, that the dead here had lingered for a long, long time, and that some kind of chemical weaponry was used to great effect in this conflict, if the far-reaching span of dead land was any indication. These spirits would be vengeful. They had died without having their honor fulfilled, without having a chance to fight for what they cared for. They would be easy to bend, break, and otherwise convert. Altrez took stock of the corpses. He was taken aback by the number. 110,000 skeletons. It was more than twice what he'd scourged from the last 3 battlefields he'd visited. He could only hope that these spirits were powerful enough to back up the impressive number with some substance. He pulled out a single skeleton key from deep within the earth, ripping inside and plucking out the bones and arranging them all neatly in what he assumed was their proper place, preparing to perform his foul ritual. The vertebrate creature he'd arranged looking nothing like anything he'd seen before. A scan counted 206 bones, and after some time and consideration, he realized where they all went, and managed to reconstruct an image of a creature with 2 arms and 2 legs, bipedal like him, and yet completely different in height and shape and thickness to other such creatures the Necromage had encountered. He brought up a handful of skeletons to compare, looking between each of them to determine if this was a status quo of whichever species this was before finally being satisfied. Animating the first skeleton and watching as the bones perfectly arranged themselves, and the creature went from floating and glowing green to merely glowing, staring at its new master in a permanent smile. "What the fuck is going on?" the skeleton said, and Altrez blinked hard.
What did you say?
The skeleton mimed yawning and stretching as he spoke. "I said, what the fuck is going on? I was asleep 5 seconds ago, and now I'm sat here chatting with your ugly mug. So, you fill me in, or am I going back to sleep?"
What?
For the first time in centuries, Altrez felt the urge to read over the forbidden tome once again for clarity on the summoning arts he purposely mastered. Coughing, he fought for his composure as best he could. Thralls can be difficult sometimes. He had to not lose his head.
You are a dead warrior. Your immortal soul has lingered in the aether for time immemorial. And now, at your time of reckoning, I, the undying scourge, have come to bring you into my service.
The tall skeleton stared down at me for a few moments, then burst into laughter. Fuck off! You had me going for a sec. You really sell it with your ye old mystic talk, you know.
You are dead.
Composure completely out the window at this point. Altreus summoned a long mirror, thrusting it in front of the unliving construct of his own design and pointing his finger at it.
Look at yourself and tell me that you haven't been long departed this world.
There was a long pause as the skeleton admired his own visage in the mirror, inspecting his teeth, dabbing his bony finger against his chin. Eventually it shrugged. Nah, fake news, bud. I don't know if I was dead, but I wouldn't be sat here talking to you, for a start.
Yeah.
With a fitful kick, robes ruffling, Altreus set about the process of reviving another skeleton, completely ignoring the blabbering nonsense of the first. Perhaps he'd happened to resurrect an outlier, and the rest would be more to the speed of the usual dead he encountered. The second skeleton returned to life with a shout, moving back 3 paces and looking all around, like he was utterly befuddled, before finally his eyes locked with the first one. Keith, Matty boy! The first skeleton roared, running over to his companion with a skitter and a gangly skelly legs, clapping his fallen comrade on the back. How the fuck can you recognize me?
Total guess, mate. I just figured if I took too many edibles with someone, it would have to have been you.
Fuck! Are we tripping balls right now? Skeleton 1 nodded to himself a few times, as to affirm his own 3. We're tripping balls! Sarge will fucking murder us if he catches us, man! We're on tonight as it is, mate.
You've already been murdered by thermoplasmic device, if I'm not mistaken.
Who the fuck is this? Skeleton 2 asked, still a little wobbly. He pointed at the long, bony figure to Altreus.
Can you see him too?
Yeah, that's weird, ain't it? He was telling me something about being dead or something.
Oh, Feck, man.
Skeleton 2 staggered up to Altreus, waving the same finger he'd pointed with in reprimand.
Look, man, you can't say shit about that people when they're high. They'll believe you. You gotta be smooth, you know. Not bad vibes. That was the issue. He didn't believe me.
Altreus wasn't sure why he was trying to reason with these creatures. Previous experiences had not prepared him for this eventuality.
What will it take for you to believe me? You're in a wasteland surrounded by 1,000 years dead comrades.
All right. Don't shout, yeah? Skeleton 2 continued. Look, just because you're Cthulhu's little cousin, or whatever, doesn't mean that you get to come here and feck with our vibe. Chill a little. Have an Eddie. Altreus had no clue what the word Eddie was, but he was rather sure that it wasn't going to get him his undead army any sooner. Neither was talking to these two, though. Then, when all hope seemed lost, when Altreus was about to wipe these two away and try again from scratch, Skeleton 2 piped up, raising his hand to speak up. Altreus rubbed his forehead.
Yes.
All right, I've just had a consultation with my good friend here, and we've come to the conclusion that we're both skeletons. A pause. And that probably the other stuff you said was true as well. A light, however faint, in the darkness and most infuriating of encounters, Altreus dared to hope.
Does that mean that you're willing to hear my proposal?
Not really. It means that we're wondering why the fuck we're skeletons. Altreus felt a vein was bulging in his forehead.
What?
We're dead, yeah? Dead, rotten, in the ground, gone. Skeleton 1 pointed at one of the not yet animated skeletons as an example. Like that one.
Yes?
And it was pretty chill, like a big sleep. Altreus nodded, impatient. And then you woke us up. See the problem? Altreus scowled at the pair.
Yes, most certainly I do.
It wasn't difficult to prepare a suitable spell of subjugation. Many creatures were more willing to serve in death, but to deal with pesky, strong-spirited armies such as this one, a simple means to bind the creatures into service would suffice. As Altreus cited an ancient chant, the two skeletons looked at him as if he were utterly mental. When he was finally finished, and the sigil lines had been painted across the air and affixed in every direction around the battlefield, hundreds of feet long throughout the sky, the first skeleton was tapping his foot. Listen, mate, I think that we've been pretty patient with you so far, but if we're dead, this is kind of like our new house. Now, and no one actually invited you, so if you'd kindly take back our consciousness and fuck off. Ultras stared desperately at the spell lines decorating the air for half a mile all around him. Lines he'd mastered over centuries of application and use. Lines he'd hoped would finally silence the inane chatter of the creature before him. Would bend him to his servitude. Would be worth the depletion of his mana.
Why isn't it working?
Desperately, Ultras began to raise more and more skeletons, hoping to find a cooperative one. Spencer!
Holy shit, boys! How high are we?
Davy! Quiet down. I'll be up in a minute. Haddock Chol Bazoonarg! But, what did you get him up for? He's a part of the other army. Ultras poured increasing levels of mana into his spell, clamping spectral chains to the warriors as he raised his hundreds, thousands of them, affixing each chain to his tendrils and then using them to pull the warriors closer, to bind them in place. Each flourish of his hand and tightening of the spell were testament to his many years of necromancy, his prowess.
You are dead, forgotten souls. You have no will, no place, no power, and you will serve me under your final death and call me master, for I am the undying scourge, and you are only...
Piss off! I'm not working with a fucking Gary again. You'll have to torture me.
Do we get decent health care package? Dental?
Fuck me! Hey, you ever heard of human rights? Are those optional where you come from? In a flurry of responses, while hundreds of dead warriors, the necromancer caught an unfamiliar word. Only, it was incredibly familiar all the same. It wasn't unfamiliar because he didn't understand it, only because it was clamped right in front of the forbidden tome in one of the earliest chapters in big, bold letters. The name of a species he never was yet to encounter. Human. That passage went on to describe a race so unsusceptible to magical influence that it literally had zero effect on them. A race capable of rebelling against every command a necromancer dared utter. A race so entirely free from the clutches of magical influence that certain empires had steered clear of their solar system entirely on the grounds that they were deemed unconquerable. And Ultras had managed to stumble onto one of their worlds without realizing the folly. I'll do it if you pay me.
I was a lieutenant before I died, so you've got to pay me more.
No, you weren't, you lying bone bagment. You just want to one-up us.
I was. I had a degree in law before I signed up, so they made me an officer.
Okay, name 10 laws. Ultras opened another portal and left at some point during that exchange, one of the many that were currently taking place on the battlefield, that the incredibly mana-intensive resurrection spell was still tearing through. Well, that was a total fecking waste of time. Fecking humans. Ultras sighed, staring through his dreary lair. Being a necromancer sucked. He'd only done it because he had a really terrible hay fever, and dead shit didn't make him sneeze. He poured himself a glass of wine, thinking over the most recent failures. The 400 years he'd spent trying and failing to usher the universe into a new era of death and darkness. He concluded that he'd gotten a little high-strung lately, perhaps a bit lonely too. Ultras probably did need to chill. Maybe instead of rebuilding his army of dead, he'd go find out what this Eddie was next. There was always a chance he could pay the dead earthlings with them. End of story. I'd quickly like to thank the T5 peeps. Bitmori, Terran on Air, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Severin Cerberus, Red Panda 121, Leslie 517, Bushmaster 177, Caspar Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, Lightsjock, Dragzoon WRE, Lord Azrakul, and Arcadian. Thank you.